Here's the most important thing to understand about the Enneagram, whatever type you are. It's not about what's on the surface. That stuff you know already. The Enneagram puts a sharper spin on it. That's true. Better than most personality tests. But what really matters is what it tells you in the background about why you are the way you are. What drives you? The Enneagram is an excellent tool for discovering that. What we call the underlying driver of your behavior. It's the piece that connects all the dots. And the thing to know about that, the underlying driver of behavior, is that it's built on avoidance. It's the thing you learn to protect yourself against from a very young age as a way to stay safe, prove yourself, be accepted, loved, all those things. That protection racket that you ran formed the basis of a strategy. That strategy developed into what you call your personality. That's what your Enneagram type describes. But what it's really telling us is the other stuff, the strategy and the thing it's built on, that avoidance. Here's an example. Let's say you grew up in an incredibly strict household, one where obeying the rules was not just important, but the number one thing. To survive in that environment and belong and be accepted and so on, you would have avoided breaking the rules. Duh. Your strategy was to be the good kid, the one who followed all the rules. You took that with you to school and everywhere you went, right into adulthood. Or maybe you were so bad at keeping the rules that you took it in the other direction. You actively rebelled. To survive, you had to escape, either literally out the window at night or into your imagination, where you fantasized about the great things you'd do one day. That's another strategy. And you took that with you to school. You became the rebel, the disruptor, maybe the one with all the ideas and imagination. Can you see how your avoidance became a strategy, which became your personality, which shows up in your Enneagram type? And can you see how the Enneagram can point back to that avoidance and help us to undo the whole mess? I'm Neil Bierbaum. I'm an Enneagram practitioner. I've used it in my leadership coaching practice for more than a decade. In this video, I'm going to link the Enneagram to man's development. I'll do that by showing how your Enneagram type maps to another framework that I've created, adapted from other authors, Carl Jung and Robert Bly, and it's called The 4 Stages of Male Maturity. I'll also show how your journey through those 4 stages is really a journey to reclaim your shadow. And if you've done any men's work, you'll know that term. It's the part of yourself that you decided a long time ago that you could not allow, and then spent the rest of your life quietly managing, hoping nobody would notice, including you. And I'll show you how the Enneagram can help you do that by revealing the theme of your individual shadow, and therefore what the great arc of your journey to maturity is all about. And by the way, this playlist is about men and maturity, how we actually grow up and all the ways we get stuck. If that's your thing, hit subscribe, because this video is one of many that provides a map for navigating the path to maturity through those 4 stages. And before we get to the Enneagram proper, let's bring in that other model, the 4 stages of male maturity. I'll be quick. There are a bunch of videos on my channel about it, the main one being this one, linked up here, and in the description. To reach a level of fulfillment and wisdom, a man needs to negotiate these 4 stages successfully. The problem is, many don't. They get stuck, especially in our modern era where we've lost the traditional markers that used to move men along. So here are the 4 stages. The first one is given the color red, and that is roughly between the years 16 to mid-20s, 25. And the theme is rebellion. And that's when testosterone is at its peak and young men are full of defiance and energy that needs to go somewhere. So we used to send them to war. These days we send them to play rugby if we can, or they burn it up on the couch with video games. Probably not the best solution. We need to get them out doing things and spending that energy physically, and their testosterone as well. And by this stage, your Enneagram strategy is starting to become visible, though you might have a good disguise for it under that cool exterior that you put out all the time. It's unlikely you'll be naming your avoidance with any great awareness. Then comes the stage of white, which is mid-20s to mid-30s, and the theme there is compliance. So here your strategy is starting to solidify, and you're starting to get behind it as the real thing, as you. We can think of the white knight. You now represent the establishment that you used to rebel against. You uphold the rules that you used to break, and you defend them, usually a little too hard. Typically, you might be moving into management, senior employment and management, and traditionally you would have been getting married, having children during this phase as well. Instead of being the rebel, you're now representing the company as a manager. You're representing society as a parent. And that's why the shift to white happens. And so you start to really get behind that. And at this stage, you're likely to be merged with your avoidance and treating it like it's your best friend. It still seems to be working for you. Then comes grey, which begins in your late 30s and runs all the way to your mid-50s. And the theme there is integration. This is the midlife reckoning. The strategy that got you this far quietly stops working, and everything you've been avoiding starts breaking through. Life is trying to show you that the strategy you've been using is limited, that you need to expand your range of options and possibilities of who you are as a human being. And this is where things get messy, and you get faced with a choice: to double down on your strategy or let the new information in. And this is the start of the midlife crisis, which can be a smooth transition if you do let that information in, the feedback that you're getting from life, in other words. And there's a good chance that you're here watching this because you're going through that stage and you're looking for ways to handle it. And then comes black, the fourth stage from mid-50s and on, and the theme there is wisdom. And that means having taken back what you threw away. Now you can finally hold both sides at once. You can be firm and forgiving, for example, driven and content. And importantly, not every man makes it to black. Some don't even make it to grey. They get stuck in white, just going harder and harder at a strategy that's failing. Some panic and bolt back to red and buy the motorcycle. And some don't even get out of red. They remain boys their whole lives. The interesting question is, what exactly does each man have to pick up again in order to move on? And that's where the Enneagram is genuinely brilliant in pointing to exactly what that thing is. And so here's the part that you came for, the 9 types. I'll describe each one and what each one avoids and the exact shape of his shadow. See if you can spot yourself as I go through them. So first up is the type 1, whom I call the principled perfectionist. So this is the guy we referenced earlier who avoids breaking the rules, avoids not meeting standards, whether it's quality standards, moral standards, ethical standards. They're always trying to measure up and achieve those and enforce those rules and standards on themselves and on everyone else. They're typically the process guy. They're the guy who will turn everything into a process and insist that everybody follows it, and can't believe that someone would break the rule. Like, you must be doing it to annoy me, because how could you not follow the rules? For them, it's easier to follow the rules than not follow the rules. And sure, others might also be rule-bound and follow the rules or follow process. But in this case, as you can see from the way I've described it, this is his main thing. And so you can see it's the thing that drives him. It's the thing that makes him most mad when it doesn't get done. It really is that core driver. The avoidance is the core driver. There you can see the link. And so the shadow for this guy is his own bad behavior, any secret desires that he might have that would mean breaking some rules if he pursued them. Like some guys might secretly love big cars and then will not allow themselves to have that because a big car would run against their rule about being environmentally friendly. And on the screen now you can see the personas that I'm saying he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity. You can find out more about those in the separate video for his type and ultimately in the reports on each type. So this man's integration path is to turn hard rule keeping into flexible guiding principles. The type 2 I'm calling the generous best friend. He's the guy who avoids his own needs. And once again, others might sacrifice themselves for others, but for this guy, it's his main thing. He's always out there helping others to the point of self-neglect. If you've ever watched Queer Eye, most of the men that they help are this type of man. You know, unkempt hair, beard, scruffy clothes, untidy house, because he's the school teacher or the sports coach or the pastor running around looking after everybody else. So this man's shadow is his own selfishness, which in his mind means paying attention to himself in any way or any kind of asking for something that he wants or needs. That would make him look selfish, and he can't have that. Again, on the screen now, you can see the personas that I'm saying he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity. Once again, you can find out more about those in the separate video for his type and in the reports. This man's integration path is to put on his own oxygen mask before he helps others. Type 3 is the golden boy. He avoids failure, which for him is anything less than winning or being number one. His greatest concern is reputation, and he works deliberately to cultivate that. That's his main thing. So he'll always look the part and be the best, and if he can't, he won't even go there. And so this man's shadow is the real self underneath the highlight reel, The things he would feel, say, and do if personal feelings mattered a damn over what other people admire. Again, you can see now the various personas that I say he'll take on as he moves through the 4 stages of maturity, and more about that in the video and reports. And this man's integration path is learning to share the spotlight. Type 4, I call the deep original. So he avoids ordinariness, which means being just a number, one of the crowd, ordinary. And this applies to his choice of career, as much as to the way he solves problems, even the way he dresses. He'll want to select things to look different, to feel different. He will always have the unique and original solution to a problem, the out-the-box thinking. And career-wise, he's probably going to be more in the creative side than in the corporate side. This man has a genuine inner depth and sensitivity. These are qualities that don't really match the brutality of the outside world. And so he constantly feels broken in some way. Internally, he has this deep inner world, but he also feels a sense of brokenness. Typically, like the artist, this man has a tremendous capacity for the pain and suffering of the world, and he feels it deeply. And what he's really good at is turning that into art in the form of music, poetry, etc. So that's typically the artist's temperament. And what do we know about artists? They're terrible at representing themselves. They need an agent. So this man constantly has that sense of never feeling quite there, always having to do more deep inner work in order to develop himself. So that's what you'll find as the ongoing theme, is creativity and self-development and searching for this man. Now this man's shadow is his own ordinariness, the fact that he is, in some ways, like the rest of us, just a number, and just like everyone else. That's the thing that he finds it difficult to accept, tolerate, and integrate. And yet, like for everyone else, accepting and integrating that is the path to maturity. And once again, you can see the personas that I'm saying he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity. More about those in the separate video for his type and in the reports. And his integration path is to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. Type 5 is the learned observer. This is the guy who is obsessed with facts, data, and information. Likes to think, likes to analyze, and only likes to act and speak when he knows what he's talking about. So his avoidance is social exposure, being caught out not knowing something. And these two come together, for example, when he's asked to make an impromptu presentation or hang out at a cocktail party making small talk. He'll consider both a waste of his limited time and energy, taking him away from his important research or other knowledge-based work. So his shadow is being stupid. In other words, being caught not knowing something, but even more so, giving his limited time and energy to stupid activities or people. In other words, connecting for the sake of connecting, having fun for the sake of having fun. He really finds it hard to understand the purpose of that kind of thing. On the screen now, you can see the personas I'm saying he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity, and you can find out more about those again in the video for his type and in the reports. This man's integration path is kind of like that of Scrooge or maybe the Grinch. In other words, discovering the meaning of Christmas, connection, all those things. Type 6, I'm calling the faithful skeptic. This man avoids risk and danger, or he mitigates against it through excessive planning and demonstrating and cultivating loyalty. So he's got an eye and a radar for what could go wrong in any situation. Typically, if somebody's planning something, he'll already know why it might not be able to happen, what the pitfalls are. If he's going on holiday, he'll have planned all the pit stops along the way. Anything that he does will be done with impeccable planning. So he'll always be ready for an emergency. He'll be the one to know to stay calm and know exactly what to do when there's a crisis. So this man's shadow is his own easygoing, free-flowing, and because he's human like the rest of us, his sometimes untrustworthy nature. On the screen now, you can see the personas he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages, and more about those in the video and report. His integration path is to recognize that sometimes, when you let it, life has better plans than you could ever make. And if you're one of those men, you'll know exactly what I mean. Type 7, we call the Restless Optimist. He avoids negative experiences and people, especially ones that impose restrictions of any kind. So he'll want to escape or bypass them immediately and get to the next exciting or positive thing. So he's the guy we described earlier who was all about breaking the rules And he might accept some rules, some processes, if they make sense to him. But certainly his first response is always to look, is there a way around this? Is this really necessary? So they make good entrepreneurs because they're always finding ways to create solutions where other people see obstacles. And this man's shadow is serious depth and long, slow engagement for the sake of a result. In other words, sticking out a job for a long time, sticking in relationships. These can be, not guaranteed, but can be challenging for this kind of man. On the screen now, you can see the personas I'm saying that he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity. More again in the video for his type and in the reports. And his integration path is learning to walk the plane of the earth, to get somewhere by putting one foot in front of the other. 8, I call a powerful protector. This man avoids being weak or vulnerable, which can mean handing over control of a project to someone else, as much as it can mean showing his soft side. So the world is a dangerous place, and you have to be tough to survive. This is his philosophy, your philosophy, if you're this man. And you have to do things your way to get results. This is how you learned it early in life. There was nobody there to look after you, perhaps, and this was the only way to get by. And so this man's shadow is the soft, unprotected boy underneath all of that armor. For that same reason, he tends to be a lot about justice and fighting for the underdog. He will protect the bullied fearlessly if he ever spots that happening. And on the screen now, you can see the personas I'm saying that he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages of maturity. More in the videos and in the reports. And his integration journey is to walk the path of a Mandela. In other words, letting even your enemy have a say in your solution. And type 9 is the gentle peacemaker. This man avoids conflict, which he frames as a purely destructive, never constructive force that leads to the breakdown of relationship. So he has a very negative framing for conflict. And beneath that, there's almost the sense that if he asserts his own will, his own opinions, his own views, or his own wants and needs, that it will lead to conflict. And so he tends to avoid that. He tends to suppress that. So while the 2, remember, does that in order not to appear selfish, this man does it for reason of avoiding conflict. And that's where the Enneagram is very useful in distinguishing between the different types, because as we said, it points to the area of avoidance. What's the driver of that behavior? This man is avoiding the conflict, which he believes leads to the breakdown of relationships, his negative framing of conflict. And so the shadow for this man is his own life force, which carries his wants and needs. Because when you express those in the world, they might put you into conflict with others, right? I want this, and it conflicts with what you want. So then we have to work something out. And so expressing that would put him at odds with others. That's what's lurking in his shadow. On the screen now, you can see the personas that he'll inhabit on his journey through the 4 stages, and you can get more in the videos and reports on that. And this man's integration path is learning to set out a stall in the busy marketplace and discover that people will still buy from him. So those are the 9 Enneagram types mapped against the 4 stages of maturity very broadly, and more details in the other videos, as I said. And you can probably already get a sense of which one is you. It's also possible that there are 2 that speak to you. That's fine. Explore both. I've done more than 500 debriefs. I've seen the data. We all have elements of all 9 types, and usually there are 2 that are dominant. The question is always, which is your main thing? What's your dominant type? Often when I start a debrief, I'll ask people, what's the worst thing in the world for you? The worst thing people can ask, or what annoys you the most? And I usually find they've done the questionnaire and there's the report. And the first thing that comes up, the very first sentence they speak, one of the first words they use, will point back to that exact style. And so the correlation between the 2 is very strong in terms of what we avoid and what our type is. And just to be clear, what we're doing here isn't standard Enneagram practice. You'll get Enneagram zealots who insist you must only have one type and you must work with the lines and blah, blah, blah. I'm more interested in making it simple and effective, especially for men who are already doing shadow work. As I've shown, the shadow is implied by the type, and that gives us very clearly the broad theme of the man's path to integration, to wholeness, to what he needs to bring back that has been shut out. In fact, let me clarify something quickly, since this video only goes up once. In pure Enneagram terms, integration means moving forward to take on the positive attributes of another type in the direction of the arrows. For example, in Enneagram speak, you'll hear 1 integrates to 7, meaning the critical rule-bound type 1, our rule-bound guy from the earlier examples, learns to see things more positively and to be less rigid about rules, which are typical type 7 traits, type 7 being our rebel guy. The problem I have with that is, firstly, you have to learn about that other type, which you don't really have time for, especially if you're already doing shadow work. And drawing on the Jungian concept of the shadow has the same outcome, but lets us remain within the type, and it aligns with the 4 stages of maturity framework and men's shadow work, which I believe is very useful. And so that's just to deal with the Enneagram purists out there, of which there are many. Here's what you need to know. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming a different type. That's never going to happen. The generous type 2 is never going to become an image-conscious type 3. And integration is also not about flipping into the opposite of a type. So the passive 9 is never going to become like a domineering, action-oriented 8. It's about letting the stuff in that you've been avoiding or denying. And for men, doing that usually feels like a loss. I've covered this in other videos as well. But you soon discover that it's an expansion. You increase your range of possible responses to a situation, to life. So you start out in life being a little one-sided, quite pronounced in your type, and life lets you get away with it when you're young. But eventually it stops doing that and says, it's payback time. So life, in the form of your wife, kids, colleagues, customers, starts to present you with evidence, with results, things not going your way. Here are the results you've been getting, it says. Can you see these patterns? And they're not because life is unfair, they're because you keep treating life the same way as you found it when you were a kid. You're no longer a kid, and the big world out there is not the world you grew up in. So get with the program. You don't have that same parent breathing down your neck about how you better succeed or else, or punishing you when you break a rule. You don't still live in the same house as those siblings who were always bullying you, or that unreliable parent who made you hypervigilant about what could go wrong. That defense was necessary for you back then. It probably kept you alive. In fact, that's probably how your brain stored it, as a survival mechanism. But that's not what it is now. It's no longer keeping you alive. It's preventing you from living a full life. And you can't rush this, you 3s and 7s and 8s who are so impatient. Maybe you can accelerate it with some coaching, but you can't skip to the next stage before you're ready. You have to live the journey. In the red stage of maturity, you spend the energy of your type freely. In white, you build the mask and you over-defend it. And grey is where the shadow comes home. By that stage, the evidence is piled up at your door, and you have to deal with it. And black is where a man can finally hold his own contradictions, and everyone else's, with a bit of humor about the whole thing. But you don't get to black by becoming a better white knight. You get there by integrating what the white knight could never afford to be. That's the whole path. So I invite you to watch the video that holds all of this together, the 4 stages of male maturity, and then come back and engage more deeply with the type descriptions that I've given you and see which one is you. There's a written version of this on my blog as well. The link is below. And from there, from this video or the article, then you can start to choose your type and go into those individual articles or videos, which are available here as well, or will be, depending on when you're watching this. And from there, choose your report if you want to go into it in more detail. And when you're assessing what your type is, be honest with yourself. It's about who you are based on evidence, not who you'd like to be or how you like to see yourself. If you're not sure, ask those around you. Your children will be the most honest, and then your spouse, your work colleagues, your friends, probably in that order. And maybe you do find more than one type fits, as I said, that's fine, but keep it down to those 2. And then link to those companion videos, articles, and go into each type in more depth. Get the paid reports, which takes it further still. Each one describes how your type tends to show up at every one of the 4 stages of maturity, so you can gauge how far you've developed and what the next phase of your growth is likely to look like. If you're younger, it's a heads up for what your 40s and 50s may bring, so it doesn't blindside you. If you're older, it may explain a great deal about what you're going through right now and what to do about it. And finally, if you'd like to go still further, you can work with me directly. All the links are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want more like this. This is Growing Men, supporting men to grow stronger and live deeper. Neil Bierbaum. I'll see you in the next one.